Pax Romana, Latin for Roman peace, is a roughly 200-year-long time span of Roman history, which have been termed a miracle because prior to it there had never been peace for so many centuries in a given period of history. It is traditionally dated as commencing from the accession of Caesar Augustus in 27 BC and concluding in 180 AD with the death of Marcus Aurelius. Prior to Pax Romana, the Roman state had been plagued by a century of civil wars. Augustus created a junta of the greatest military magnates and stood as the front man. By binding together these leading magnates in a coalition and appointing governors with military power who answered directly to the emperor or the senate, he eliminated the prospect of civil war by force, ushering in an era of unparalleled peace. Today we are in the middle of a similar period of peace termed the Long Peace, which is counted to have begun at the end of the Second World War and stretches until present time. Since 1945, no nation recognized by the UN has been conquered and erased from the map. Limited wars between states do still sometimes occur, and millions of people still die in war, but war is no longer the norm. The last serious war between states in South America was between Peru and Ecuador in 1941. In the Muslim world, there has only been two full-scale wars since the Arab countries became independent: the Iran-Iraq War in 1980 and the Gulf War in 1990. And following the independence of the states in Africa between 1960 and 1970, very few countries have invaded one another with the purpose of conquering. Battle deaths in state-based conflicts per 100,000 people per year has dropped from 21.64 in 1950 to 1.17 in 2016. The stacked area chart here shows that the number of ongoing conflicts each year has risen. This increase, however, only relates to civil conflicts within states. Conflicts related to the expansion or defense of colonial empires ended with decolonization. The increase in the number of wars is predominantly an increase of smaller and smaller internal conflicts. This follows from the previously shown graph that the number of war victims declined while the number of conflicts increased. Thus, there is even a trend of decreasing deadliness in conflicts within states. Historically, there has never been real peace. There have been calm periods before, but they have always ended with full-scale war. Pax Romana ended with foreign invasions, and peace between 1871 and 1914 ended with the First World War. Throughout history, war has always been considered a close and reasonable possibility, and the expectation of war therefore colored everyone's thinking during these times. Thus, these peace periods were not only characterized by the absence of war, but also by the presence of its shadow, always hanging over them, ready to descend at any moment. This time, it is different. Full-scale war is no longer considered a close and reasonable possibility. What scenario would possibly make modern France invade Germany or Brazil invade Argentina, for example? Today, most people have a hard time imagining this, meaning war no longer colors our minds, and its shadow no longer hangs over us. There are of course a handful of states that this does not apply to: Israel and Syria, Ethiopia and Eritrea, or USA and Iran, but these are exceptions and not the rule. There are several factors that together explain how this time of peace came about and why it is different. The first factor has to do with the decrease in the potential winnings of war. Historically, states could enrich themselves by conquering and annexing hostile territory. Most of these territories' resources would have been made up of fields, cattle, slaves, and gold, and was therefore easy to occupy or plunder. Today, riches are made up of human capital, technical know-how, and complex economical structures like banks, which are hard to transport or incorporate into your own territory. Take California, for example. Today, its riches are based on silicon and celluloid, Silicon Valley and Hollywood. Its riches are inside the head of Google's developers and Hollywood's screenwriters, directors, and VFX artists. It's not a coincidence that the few full-scale wars that are still being waged like the Iraqi invasion of Kuwait, are being fought over places where riches are of the old, material kind, like oil. The second factor concerns the potential winnings of peace. Today, peacetime is more lucrative than ever. In traditional agricultural economies, distance trade and foreign investments were fringe phenomenon. Therefore, peace did not entail big winnings, except for avoiding the costs of war. If, for example, there was peace between England and France in the year 1400, the French did not have to pay war tax or suffer an English invasion, but beyond this, peacetime was not beneficial for the economy. In modern capitalistic economies, distance trade and foreign investment is the most important thing. As long as, for example, China and the US have peace, they can import, export, and invest in each other and gain tremendously as a result. The third factor relates to a significant shift in the global political culture. Many elites in history, like the chiefs of the Huns, the magnates of the Vikings, and the Aztec priests, viewed war as something good. Others viewed war as something bad, but a necessary bad, something you must use to your advantage. Our time is the first in history where the world is dominated by a peace-loving elite, politicians, businessmen, intellectuals, and artists that see war as something evil that can and should be avoided. The most prominent examples of this attitude are embodied in people like Mahatma Gandhi, Nelson Mandela, and Martin Luther King. As this pacifistic culture spreads, wars decline and trade flourishes, and the spread of trade increases the winnings of peace and the cost of war. The increasing tightness of the global web of trade undermines most nations' independence, which makes it hard for any one country to start a war. No nation can run completely independent economical or foreign politics, and no nation can bear a full-scale war on their own. The result is an implicit global empire, and just like the Roman Empire, this one wants to keep the peace inside its borders. And since the global empire encloses the whole world, it strives to maintain world peace. But there is one thing that is missing from this picture. One factor that reigns supreme over all others. The one factor that made it possible for the others to even emerge in the first place. In Rome, it was Caesar Augustus and his uniting of the great military magnates and the subsequent policing of the provinces that kept war from breaking out. Today, it's something much, much worse. The answer lies with the thing that started the long peace. The thing that laid waste to 2 cities in the span of a couple of days, killing between 150 and 200,000 people. The thing that ended the Second World War. The invention of the atomic bomb.
The plan at the time, the only plan, the integrated operational plan, was that if the Soviet Union invaded Western Europe or tried to occupy West Berlin, even just with conventional weapons, not even using nuclear weapons, the plan was to unleash the entire US nuclear arsenal at every target in the Soviet Union, the satellite nations of Eastern Europe, and Communist China, even if China had no direct involvement in the war. And it was estimated that this would kill 285 million people.
Full-scale war has since 1945 been the act of collective suicide. The only reason we have been able to come this far in our process of peace is because we gave ourselves a choice where the only option was total annihilation. In Pax Romana, peace was held by force, with the shadow of war constantly hanging over people like a terrifying promise. Now, peace and prosperity is voluntarily exercised and spreading, with the shadow of non-existence hanging over us like a fatal roll of the dice. We rule in unparalleled peace, ruled by unparalleled destruction. This is our time. This is Pax Atomica. I don't know if anyone will find this video, let alone watch it all the way through, but if you did, thank you. I've just decided to start making videos about things that interest me in an attempt to channel my creativity and to cement my own worldview. So, if you enjoyed the video, maybe you would consider liking it. And if you think you would have an interest in looking at the world through a philosophical lens, maybe you would consider subscribing as well. Anyway, I hope you have a great week, and we may hear from each other in my next video. Bye.